Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Govt and these are the headlines. Prime Minister Imran Khan says India is sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan. In an interview, Khan said India is fanning sectarianism to destabilize Pakistan. He added that Afghan peace process is moving in the right direction. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Armenian forces must withdraw from Nagorno-Karabakh for a solution to the conflict. Heavy shelling between Armenian and Azeri forces persisted for a fifth day, despite fresh calls from the world leaders for a ceasefire. In a joint statement, Russia, France and the US called on both the sides to immediately start negotiations without preconditions. The death toll from the border clashes has surpassed 100, with both the sides claiming to have inflicted heavy losses on the other. Lebanon says a framework has been agreed for talks with Israel to end a long-running border dispute between the two countries. Speaking at a news conference, Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri said the talks will be held in South Lebanon near the border under the auspices of the United Nations. The US has welcomed the agreement, saying it has the potential to yield greater stability for Lebanese and Israeli citizens alike. India has registered nearly 1,200 COVID-19 deaths and almost 87,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. The virus has claimed over 1,000 more lives in Brazil since yesterday, taking the death toll to over 143,000. In Pakistan, 5 people have died from the virus overnight, bringing the count to 6,484, with over 312,000 infected. Globally, coronavirus has claimed over 1 million lives and infected more than 33.8 million people so far. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Armenian forces must withdraw from Nagorno-Karabakh for a solution to the conflict. Heavy shelling between Armenian and Azeri forces persisted for a fifth day, despite fresh calls from world leaders for a ceasefire. The official death toll has surpassed 100, including civilians, with both the sides claiming to have inflicted heavy losses on the other. Meanwhile, Russia, France and the US called on both the sides to immediately start negotiations. Earlier, Azeri President Ilham Aliyev vowed to fight until Armenia leaves the disputed Karabakh region. He said peace will be established in the region when Yerevan fulfills Baku's demand over Karabakh claim. Baku's defense ministry has claimed to have killed at least 2,300 Armenian soldiers so far. On the other hand, Armenia claims killing 130 Azeri soldiers and wounding 200 others. 11 people have been killed in a car bomb attack on a military checkpoint in Afghanistan's southern Helmand province. A spokesman for the Helmand governor said 7 security personnel and 4 civilians were killed, blaming the Taliban for the attack. He said 3 soldiers and 1 child were wounded in the attack. The Taliban have not commented on the claims. The European Parliament has welcomed the intra-Afghan negotiations, calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the country. In a joint statement, members of the European Parliament called for the talks to be inclusive and representative of all the factions of the society. They said a comprehensive peace process is a precondition to end 4 decades of death and destruction in the country. The members said the talks are an opportunity to bring stability, security and peace to Afghanistan. The EU Parliament assured its continuous solidarity and support to the Afghan people, government and security forces. The statement said the European Parliament stands ready to facilitate and support the peace process. Prime Minister Imran Khan says India is sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan. In an interview, Khan said India is fanning sectarianism to destabilize Pakistan. He added that the Afghan peace process is moving in the right direction. Tensions between India and Pakistan increased last year when India revoked the special status of occupied Kashmir in violation of the UN resolutions. Pakistan has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to protest the latest ceasefire violation by Indian troops along the line of control. The summoning comes a day after Indian troops wounded a 65-year-old woman in unprovoked fighting. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Indian troops are deliberately targeting the civilian population. It said India's ceasefire violations along the line of control are a threat to regional peace and stability. Indian troops have committed over 2,400 ceasefire violations this year, resulting in the martyrdom of 19 civilians. The Indian side was told to respect the 2003 ceasefire agreement. In India, Congress party leaders Rahul Gandhi and his sister Priyanka Gandhi Vadra have been released after a brief detention. The two were detained on their way to Hathras city to meet the family of the gang rape victim. Talking to reporters, Gandhi said the Uttar Pradesh police pushed him to the ground and baton charged him. The two leaders were marching on the highway between Delhi and Uttar Pradesh after the convoy was stopped. Ahead of their visit, the UP administration enforced a ban on large gatherings and put up barricades at the borders. Protests have broken out in several parts of India as another woman died after being gang raped. Lebanon says a framework has been agreed for talks with Israel to end a long-running border dispute between the two countries. Still in a formal state of war, the two states have contested their land and maritime borders for decades. Speaking at a news conference, Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri said the talks will be held in South Lebanon near the border under the auspices of the United Nations. Berri said the United States will push for a deal between the two nations as quickly as possible. Israel's energy minister confirmed the two sides will hold US-mediated talks. Lebanon's change of track comes amid a crippling economic crisis. Israel's military vehicles have infiltrated Palestine's border in Gaza, east of Khan Yunis city. Local media says military bulldozers razed Palestinian farmlands. It said Israeli troops shot fire to force the farmers and shepherds in area to flee as they razed the land. Israel still controls the land borders and has access to sea and airspace in the Gaza Strip after 14 years of apparent disengagement. Gaza's 2 million population remains under occupation and a strict siege by the Israeli forces. A US-led coalition forces base has been targeted with multiple rocket strikes near Iraq's northern Kurdistan region. Iraqi Kurdistan's counter-terrorism service said the US-installed anti-missile air defense systems Patriot have thwarted 2 of the rockets. It said popular mobilization forces carried out the attack against the coalition. However, in a statement, US-led coalition spokesman Colonel Wayne Maroto said the rocket fire did not strike the coalition base. He said there are no casualties or damage to report and the incident is under investigation. Earlier, Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi pledged to protect foreign missions after the US threat to shut down its embassy in Baghdad. No group has claimed the responsibility for the attack, which occurred hours after the pledges. The European Union has launched a legal action against the UK over its internal market bill. EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen says Brussels has sent a formal notice to London after it failed to remove the problematic clauses by the deadline. The bloc says the bill breaches the legally binding Brexit agreement between the UK and the EU. Von der Leyen said if adopted as is, the bill will be in full contradiction to the protocol of the island. She said the Commission has asked the UK to provide explanation over passing of the bill in the Parliament.
This is the first step in an infringement procedure. The letter invites the UK government to send its observations within a month. And besides this, the Commission will continue to work hard towards a full and timely implementation of the withdrawal agreement, we stand by our commitments.
Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny says Russian President Vladimir Putin is behind poisoning him. In an interview to a German magazine, Navalny said his task is to remain fearless now and return to Russia as soon as possible. Navalny said he didn't feel any pain when the nerve agent began affecting him, but he knew that he was dying. The prominent Russian politician was flown to Berlin in August after falling ill on a domestic flight. He received treatment for what Germany said was poisoning by a potentially deadly nerve agent before being discharged last month. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has denied any involvement in the incident. French President Emmanuel Macron says Belarusian opposition leader is open to dialogue with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Élysée presidential palace said Macron spoke to Putin by telephone after visiting exiled Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. In a statement, the palace said Macron urged President Putin to consider Tikhanovskaya's proposal. It said the two presidents backed the idea of mediation by the Organization for Security and Cooperation. Earlier, Macron pledged Europe's support for the people of Belarus after his meeting with Tikhanovskaya. Belarus has been marred by protests and political unrest following a presidential election widely criticized as rigged. US President Donald Trump has signed a stopgap spending bill in order to avert a government shutdown. The Senate passed the bill just hours before a midnight deadline. The Senate voted 84-10 to approve the bill, which extends current funding levels and keeps the federal government open through December 11. The new legislation is a $2.2 trillion package that would send around another round of direct payments to individuals and revive the expired $600 weekly federal unemployment benefits. The measure adds nearly $8 billion to address desperately needed nutrition assistance for children and families. The bill further extends funding for community health centers to continue to address COVID-19 and health disparities. U.S. House lawmakers have slammed the country's Defense Department over plans to withdraw thousands of troops from Germany. At a House Armed Services Committee hearing, bipartisan legislators grilled two senior Pentagon officials over the lack of details about the planned pullout. The panel pressed the officials about the time and the cost of the withdrawal and the level of coordination with European allies leading up to the final decision. Pentagon official James Anderson said the military did not have the required details and pledged to share plans as they are developed. When asked if it was US President Donald Trump or the Pentagon who made the decision, Anderson said he was not aware of the conversations. Earlier in July, US announced plans to withdraw about 12,000 troops from Germany, accusing Berlin of failing to meet NATO's defense spending target. India has registered nearly 1,200 COVID-19 deaths and almost 87,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, coronavirus has claimed over 1 million lives and infected more than 33.8 million people so far. More in this report.
COVID-19 is showing no signs of slowing, forcing countries to choose between collapsing economies and restrictive measures to contain the second wave of the outbreak. India's coronavirus fatalities have jumped to over 6.3 million, with the death toll nearing 99,000. A recent report by the Indian Health Authority says more than 63 million people may have contracted COVID-19. This makes the tally about 10 times higher than the official count.
जिन्होंने अपनी समस्याओं को नजरअंदाज करते हुए
The death statistics coming forward tell us that majority of the cases are because of delayed response. It means that it came from those who ignored the initial symptoms and comorbidities. They took home remedies and didn't visit doctors. When the symptoms increased and they faced problems, they visited hospitals. This is very painful for both health workers and patients.
The fatal virus is now gaining a foothold in Canada's most populous province, Ontario, which is witnessing an exponential increase in locally transmitted cases. In America, states continue to report record new cases, fearing an explosion in COVID-19 cases as the influenza season approaches. In Latin America, the disease is claiming thousands of lives every day, with Brazil being hit the hardest as it reported over 1,000 more deaths today. The With the government's refusal to implement restrictions, Sao Paulo state has reached out to a Chinese company for bulk buying of a prospect vaccine.
Our target is simple. So we will bring enough vaccine to Brazil. The most important, we also bring the affordable vaccine to be here and to benefit everyone in this country to against this COVID-19 pandemic.
The situation in Western Europe is getting worse by the day, with new infections back to peak pandemic levels in France. Spain has locked down Madrid again after it accounted for more than a third of the total cases diagnosed in the country over the past 2 weeks.
The coronavirus pandemic continues to follow a flat curve in Pakistan as the recovery rate in the country remains steady at 95%. The Health Ministry says there are 8,825 active cases in the country as over 297,000 people have recovered. The ministry said 5 people have lost their lives to the COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 6,484. It said 543 more tested positive overnight, taking the number of total detected cases to over 312,000. The ministry said more than 137,000 cases have been detected in Sindh province, while over 99,000 have been reported in Punjab so far. In the federal capital, Islamabad, over 16,500 people have tested positive for the disease since the outbreak. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The United Nations and the world leaders have urged immediate action on biodiversity conservation at a UN summit. The participants at Biodiversity Summit discussed how to set the goals of the post-2020 framework and the means to achieve it.
Leaders from more than 100 countries, regions and international organizations spoke at the summit. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has pledged to preserve the country's valued biodiversity and resist the effects of climate change. Khan said the country is collaborating with local communities to protect its ecological diversity. He said Pakistan is among the top 10 countries vulnerable to climate change, but his government is planting 10 billion trees to fight off the impending disaster. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for greater ambition to reverse biodiversity loss.
10 years ago, we secured commitments that should have protected our planet. We have largely failed. But where effort has been made, the benefits to our economies, human and planetary health are irrefutable. Nature is resilient, and it can recover if we ease our relentless assault.
While Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro vowed to protect the Amazon from international greed, French President Emmanuel Macron called biodiversity humans' life insurance. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned of the consequences of upsetting the balance of nature.
Upset the delicate balance of nature that's been achieved over tens of millions of years, and the consequences could be catastrophic for the economy, for climate, for food security, for public health, for all the sustainable development goals. Yet alongside the growing evidence of looming disaster, I also see growing evidence of desire to avert it.
President of 75th UN General Assembly Volker Bozkir said each year 13 million hectares of forests are lost and 1 million species are at risk of extinction. He said in the last 50 years, vertebrates have declined by 68%. Bozkir also warned if humans continue down this path, they will jeopardize their ability to fight diseases and extreme events.
Italy's far-right leader Matteo Salvini is set to face a trial on Saturday for illegally detaining more than 100 migrants aboard a Coast Guard ship in 2019. Salvini, as Interior Minister, ordered 131 rescued migrants to remain on a ship for 6 days until other states decided to take them. Earlier this year, several leftist officials voted to lift Salvini's impunity and allowed Sicily's authorities to press charges against him. Salvini said his former government supported him in his decision to deny the landing of the migrants in Italy.
Days that I blocked the ship from docking at a port was a shared decision agreed with the Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte and others. But if needed, we will talk about it in a courtroom and not today. but it is clear and evident it was a shared choice. The days that the ship could not dock were needed in order to have a go-ahead from 5 European Union countries to accept the migrants who were on board the boat.
Well, 9 people have died and 10 are hospitalized as a series of forest fires swept through parts of the eastern Ukrainian region of Luhansk. Emergency services said the fires threatened 22 settlements and engulfed an area of about 18,000 hectares. In a statement, the service said 120 people have been evacuated. Local authorities said there were a total of 146 fires, 82 out of them were extinguished. The Ukrainian authorities blamed pro-Russian separatists shelling for fires. The Ukrainian Presidential Office called on law enforcement bodies to find the cause of the fires. The raging wildfires in California have broken all previous annual records. The fires have so far torched over 3.9 million acres since January, far exceeding any single year in the state's history. Scientists attribute the frequent, prolonged bouts of extreme heat, high winds, and dry lightning to climate change. The Shasta County Sheriff said a badly burnt evacuee of the Zog fire succumbed to his burns, marking the 30th fatality in the coastal state. Fire Protection Department said Zog fire is at 7% containment, while the Glass fire stands at just 2% amid irrepressible high winds. The 2025 season in the US has so far killed 30 people in California since August 15, while 10 have died in Oregon and Washington. The death toll in floods following torrential rains in Nigeria has climbed to 95. Talking to media, State Emergency Management Agency officials said 16 more people died in 19 regions of the Jigawa state. Authorities say thousands have been left homeless, while acres of cultivated lands destroyed. They say the Jigawa state has been hit the hardest. Burkina Faso, Niger, Senegal, and other countries in the region have also been hit by heavy rains and flooding this year. In West Africa, the rainy season runs from June to September. In Argentina, poverty and economic woes are growing large, and the pandemic has worsened the long-standing crisis. Analysts observe Argentina's economy has contracted a record 19.1%, when nearly half of its population has been dragged into poverty. More in this report.
The Great Depression and the pandemic fallout have affected nearly half of Argentina's population. 3.5 million people have lost their jobs during the lockdown to stem the spread of the outbreak. According to official statistics, 35.5% of Argentines were living in the poverty in the second half of the last year. The Catholic University of Argentina estimates this year poverty rate has spiked 47% at the end of June.
The impact has been on the productive structure, on the structure of job creation, on the self-employed, even on the informal worker. There is greater general poverty. We are all a little poorer. We already were last year, and now with greater inequality.
The numbers reflect an everyday reality for Argentines. Small production companies have been hit hard as the activity came to halt. Unemployment has dived up to 13.1%. Analysts say a wider work plan is needed to cope with the situation.
Get out of this poverty crisis requires a lot of imagination on the part of those in charge. Traditional programs of a few public works and a slight improvement in wages will not be enough. But a wide work plan would need to be deployed, building a strong foundation in the popular and social economy in small to medium companies.
Argentina has recently struck a deal with its creditors to restructure about $65 billion foreign debt.
Chinese are celebrating the 71st National Day to commemorate the founding of the People's Republic of China. Events are being held in mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan for 8-day long holidays.
China observes the 30th of September as Martyrs' Day to commemorate those who sacrificed their lives for independence. President Xi Jinping and other leaders attended a ceremony at Tiananmen Square to present flower baskets to deceased national heroes. At the same spot, Beijing held flag-raising ceremony to mark the National Day. Mao Zedong proclaimed the founding of China from Tiananmen Square on the 1st of October in 1949. People from all over the country have gathered at the square to express the feeling of patriotism. The 2020 National Day Gala was broadcast on channels and portals of China's Central Television. Divided into several chapters, the gala showed China's achievements, especially in epidemic prevention and control. Apart from the mainland, many actors and singers from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan brought wonderful performance to audiences as well.
Greece's most popular tourist site, the Acropolis, has been flooded in light to better illuminate the finer details of the ancient monuments on the hill. More about the new lighting system in this report.
An enhanced lighting system was set up to capture the architectural craft of all the temples at the historical site of Acropolis, from the columns of the Parthenon and Propylaea, the caryatids of the Erechtheion, as well as the walls, stones, and surrounding areas of the site. Monuments that had been in darkness were lit up for the first time. Lighting designers spent 2 months studying the Acropolis to come up with the design, which uses lighting schemes of different shades and intensity.
The light of the 21st century now embraces the Acropolis. The inauguration of the new lighting of the Acropolis is a celebration that goes beyond borders and languages, because the values that were born here are universal.
The Acropolis is visited by millions of tourists each year. In classic antiquity, it was the hub of Athenian culture and represented the splendor and power of the ancient Greeks. Over the centuries, its monuments have withstood fires, pillaging, earthquakes, and the effects of climate change.
Christian Dior has kicked off Paris Fashion Week with a socially distanced runway show. Models paraded around an art installation recalling Gothic-style stained glass windows to a live choir performance. What about the exquisite show in this report?
Fashion brands are hesitantly returning to the catwalk after holding off for many months due to the coronavirus pandemic. Paris Fashion Week will also include a mix of physical and digital events. The styles at the show contain nods to female figures or writers, including a couple of long, buttoned-up white shirts. The creative director of DIOR says the COVID-19 crisis also influenced the collection various ways.
That we have a style of life completely different from the past, because we have more private life, less social life. So our relationship also with the clothes is completely different, because I think that it could be more personal, more in relationship with our body, with our feelings.
Guests at the show wore face masks and were given temperature checks, with crowds limited to 300 rather than the usual 800 to 1,000. Some celebrities welcomed the more low-key nature of the show, where guests sat in a distance between them.
I find shows, when there isn't a social distance or there isn't masks, to be very overwhelming. So I actually feel like this new environment that we've created with more space and more respect for one another, I actually think that it's a much more pleasant way of viewing the shows and consuming art.
Meanwhile, an Extinction Rebellion protester crashed the runway with a banner. She left the scene without anyone challenging her, leaving some people confused over whether it was a stunt or part of the show. The show in Paris will run until the 6th of October.
More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. The Wall Street stocks have surged on the first day of a new quarter as investors pinned hopes on lawmakers' negotiations on further stimulus. Major technology shares gave the market some support as the shares of Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet and Facebook jumped 1%. Nasdaq Composite trading nearly 1% higher, while the indices of S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average also traded marginally higher. Meanwhile, oil prices slipped as rising coronavirus cases reduced the demand outlook, with further price pressure from a rise in OPEC output. European stocks are advancing cautiously, tracking gains on Wall Street in the previous session. European stocks 600 is trading just above the flat line. London's FTSE 100 has gained over 0.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris has advanced close to 0.5%, but Frankfurt's DAX has edged down fractionally. Earlier, Japan's Tokyo Stock Exchange halted trading due to a technical issue, while many major markets in the region were closed for holidays. Barcelona have completed the signing of American fullback Sergio Dest from Ajax for $25 million. In a statement, the club said that Dest had agreed to sign a 5-year contract. The fullback will be officially presented at Camp Nou tomorrow. He broke into Ajax's first team from their academy last season and has played 3 times for the US. The defender will compete with Sergei Roberto for a first-team berth after Portugal right-back Nelson Semedo left Barca last week. In the National Basketball Association, the Los Angeles Lakers beat Miami Heat by 116 points to 98 in the Game 1 of the finals in Florida. Lakers beat the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference Final, while the Heat downed the Boston Celtics in the East. Lakers center Anthony Davis scored 34 points and grabbed 9 rebounds as Los Angeles took down the injury-hit Miami. LA's power forward LeBron James bagged 25 points, 13 rebounds and 9 assists, while Kentavious Caldwell-Pope added 13 points. Shooting guard Jimmy Butler led Miami with 23 points, while Kendrick Nunn came off the bench to score 18 points for the Heat. This is Lakers' first NBA final since 2010, while it is Miami's first final appearance after their 2014 title. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.